Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, 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 and blessed beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So good afternoon, everyone. Namaste, and welcome to our Saturday afternoon, our Saturday at noon reading and discussion of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as translated by and commented on by Swami Prabhavananda. Swami Prabhavananda was a great soul who headed the Vedanta Society of Southern California from its inception in 1929 until he left the body very deliberately on July 4th, 1976. He was the author and translator of many works, and if ever you want to read an interpretation of the Christian tradition that is so inspiring and so will give you a greater understanding of Christ and the Christian teaching, the true teachings of Christ, I recommend Swami Prabhavananda's book, The Sermon on the Mount According to Vedanta. So anyone who hasn't read that, they might want to make themselves make that book available to them, as well as the one we're studying today. At some point, we will study the Sermon on the Mount according to Vedanta. Before we begin our reading today, is there any question left over from last week? Anything that you'd like to raise as a concern, or any comment you'd like to make from your own wisdom or experience? This is, after all, a class and not a lecture either by the Swami or by myself. So when we're studying the art of spirituality together, you're free to, at any time, make yourself known and say whatever it is that's on your mind. Anything at all from anyone. All right, Jeff, please begin where we left off last week, or where you feel it's an appropriate place to start, and we'll plunge on.
Well, namaste and good afternoon, everyone. According to my notes and my somewhat reliable memory, we're picking up with Shloka 39 of Chapter 2, which is on page 158 in the books that most of us have. Number 39. When a man becomes steadfast in his When a man becomes steadfast in his abstention from greed, he gains knowledge of his past, present, and future existences. And again, when a man becomes steadfast in his abstention from greed, he gains knowledge of his past, present, and future existences. Attachment and the anxiety with which accompanies attachment are obstacles to knowledge. As long as you are clinging desperately to the face of a precipice, and thereby to your life, you are in no condition to survey the place you climbed up from or the place toward which you are climbing. So Patanjali tells us that freedom from attachment will result in knowledge of the whole course of our human journey through past and future existences. Such knowledge would, of course, be in itself a proof of the theory of reincarnation. And that concludes the commentary.
Okay, the thing that we understand is that there must be a complete absence of greed, a complete renunciation of clinging to any desire for anything. We must want no thing. When we become capable of not wanting anything, and a thing is a thought, an experience, as well as something material in the world. Now, for most of us, this is not going to happen unless and until we experience realization. The two come together, according to Holy Mother. The moment you cease to want anything, then realization comes. And it is said that people like Swami Prabhupada, and this was his reputation, that he knew of his past existences because he was an illumined soul. And for that matter, he knew about his own future as well as the past and the futures of every one of his disciples. This is the face of the eternal teacher. This is what comes from not wanting, not desiring, or having renounced attachment to the desire for anything. Now, we must understand that spiritual desires are different than any kind of worldly desire. To have a spiritual desire is not a desire for a thing. Though we want an experience, it's not the same kind of experience that we would have in ordinary life. So before Jeff reads on, is there any comment or question or concern from anyone about this particular sutra?
This is Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
I was just kind of thinking about how I would state this from my viewpoint, and have no idea if it's accurate or not, but I think it is. That if you are clinging, his word is desperately, clinging to some desire in this world, you're kind of too buried in the weeds. And if you don't have this desire, then that frees your consciousness up to see the bigger picture, which might include your past lives. So does that?
That's precisely correct. And being in the weeds is exactly it. When we're down in the weeds, we cannot see clearly ahead of us, behind us, or anywhere around us. We can only see the weeds directly in front of us. And if those are the weeds we want, well, then more power to us. But if indeed we want out of the weeds, we must either rise above them or sink below them, depending on how you like to think about it.
And also, brother, when we think about these things, we usually are talking about knowledge of past lives. But this shloka talks about knowledge of future lives, which is kind of a new concept for me. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Well, those who attain this state of desirelessness will not be compelled to return to human birth. They will take the so-called solar path, or the path or road of the saints. And they will spend some additional time there learning the absolute final lessons. But they're not necessarily, you don't need human birth to lead to learn those lessons. One of the things that may happen is that you are invited to take human birth again so that you may learn in its completeness the lesson of service, servicefulness, and this goes beyond any conception of our left mind. This is something that goes to the heart, to the soul, and ultimately results in such a being as Christ. That you serve humanity. So all of this may become known to you when you are desireless, that this invitation will be there. You may accept the invitation. This is what Sri Ramakrishna said of some of those direct disciples that he created when he was in this recent incarnation, that they were learning this serviceful lesson. Some of them, like Vivekananda and others, never did have to learn it. They were ever free souls. And so service to humanity was in their wheelhouse from the beginning. But this is what is meant by future lives. The Dalai Lama is an excellent example of someone who keeps coming back, a soul who keeps coming back, because he is needed by his people, by the people of the world. So he's easy to point to as someone that we, at least we're told, and he himself has said it, that he's been born many times. And he said that on his 90th birthday, he would announce whether he would come again. And the question being, would he come again because he was needed? And if he was needed, he said, I would come again in my next visitation. I would come as a woman. So these are people who can see their future lives. The Dalai Lama can see his future lives.
I have a thought.
I'm not surprised, and I'm glad to hear it.
Greed in the shloka, it uses the word greed, but in our conversation about it, we have used the word desire. And the word popped up, appetite.
Mm-hmm.
If when people are dying, or if an old person is at the end of their life and they're dying, one of the things that they quit doing is eating. It's because they have no appetite.
Mm-hmm.
for life, or there's just no appetite. It's withdrawn so that their body can and soul can begin to do the work of leaving. Um, I think that appetite is required for desire. I mean, it's a kind of, it's like if you have an appetite for life, you have a desire for life, but it's not the same thing as greed. It can lead to greed. I mean, a particular desire or appetite for something, of course, can become greedy about it. But anyone who returns will, by the will, doesn't have to, but who returns to a future life must bring with them some desire or some appetite for life, not just I'm just coming to serve. They have to be able to come here and be embodied.
That's why Sri Ramakrishna said, you're absolutely right. That's why Sri Ramakrishna said very clearly, you have come to the mango grove, eat the mangoes.
The sweet ones, not the
Well,
rotten ones.
we may encounter a bitter one from time to time.
Yeah.
Brother Shankara, this is Janaki.
Yes, Janaki.
I just want to commend Cindy for that comment. I think it is really insightful and appropriate because I think this particular slokam has a great potential to make us feel bad and wrong. Because as humans, we have desires. And you hear this and you think, oh gosh, desirelessness. Well, that's what I'm supposed to be. Oh gosh. Well, I'm just about my daughter is getting married this month, and I'm trying to put together what I'm going to wear, and it's almost like this quest that my mind gets into. And so as I listen to this, I'm like kind of a little bit looking at my phone, doing online shopping. I just wanted to share that and let everybody else feel better.
Well, Janaki, there's a very big difference between wanting your daughter to have a good wedding and greed.
Well, that's Cindy's point, I think.
Exactly. That greed is we in the Wednesday night class or Wednesday night class on the Gita, we recently read one of the more famous quotations from the Gita, and it had to do with exactly this. If you indulge in your desires, in other words, if you're greedy for them, you become addicted to them. And then the syllogism goes on to show how this a sequence of events takes place that allows you or causes you to miss the entire point of life, which is self-realization. Now, having innocent desires like wanting your daughter to have a sweet wedding and all the things that are associated with that, don't make you bad and wrong in any way. And if you are able to release them as soon as their purpose is served, then they won't bind you here either. Does all that make sense?
It does, Brother Shankara.
And what Cindy said made perfect sense as usual.
Yeah, I think partly it's me. I have a tendency to hear anything, like especially in a class like this, and think I'm doing it wrong. So this is sort of me.
It's one of the reasons that you do so many things right, dear.
Well, thank you, Brother Shankara.
Is because you have this desire not to do things wrong. But the fact that it makes you feel bad about yourself sometimes, that's probably inauspicious.
I will think about that.
Just the desire to do things right and not to do them wrong is very auspicious. The idea that there's something wrong with you because you're not that yet there to doing everything exactly right is inauspicious. Anything that minimizes you, makes you feel small, reject it. Just reject it.
Dismiss what insults your soul.
Exactly.
Walt Whitman.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, dear. Dismiss what insults your soul. Thank you.
I would like to disagree about wanting to do things right is auspicious. It can be, but it can also be a real problem for a lot of us, especially women, who grow up in certain situations where, I mean, I was until maybe my mid 50s, very much like that. It was more like I had to do things perfectly. It wasn't so much right or wrong, but it was I had to do them really well or nearly perfect, or I didn't want anybody to see me doing. I didn't want anybody to know I was doing something until I could do it really well, which is like I cannot fail in front of other people. And now I'm like, go forth and fail. I'm like, which is very freeing.
Oh, yes.
And it's not go forth and be bad. It's just be my true, authentic self, playing with the true, authentic divine.
Ah,
And I think maybe it has to do with how strongly you identify with your desires. And we need to have some desires just to get along in this world, but it's what emphasis do you put on this desire versus that one, and how strongly you identify with it, that can hang you up and keep you attached to your ego and pride and all those sort of things.
now we know why the Swami chose the word greed.
I want to just add a natural extension for me of what Cindy said about go forth and fail. My definition of failure becomes more expansive and less limiting, and failure becomes not failure anymore.
Yes. Which leads to the kind of thinking that resulted in Bob Dylan's lines, there's no success like failure, and failure's no success at all. It is, it's just, we must be willing to make mistakes. We must be willing to do what we think is the right thing to do or what we want to do, and then experience what happens. Otherwise, we do not learn. We learn by doing, not by thinking. We learn what to do by thinking deeply and reaching that part of ourselves that knows intuitively what to do. But we don't learn anything new by thinking.
I've come up with a koan that maybe illustrates that point, Brother Shankara. In listening to this discussion, silly things pop up in my head. Sometimes I share them, sometimes I don't. But here's a koan presented for entertainment purposes only. I strongly desire to be desireless.
This is the job of the koan, to create a situation where the left mind is completely defeated in its ability to resolve it.
Brother.
Yes.
Yes, so I think this may be related too, because I was thinking, I believe this is in the in Patanjali, is something to the effect of the spiritual person doesn't eat too much or sleep too much. It's kind of the idea that, whatever the extreme is, a spiritual person is not doing these extremes. So I guess you could add doesn't work too much, so on and so forth. Doesn't watch too much TV, it just doesn't go to these extremes. And I don't know if you can comment on that, but isn't there something in the Yoga Sutras about the spiritual person doesn't eat too much or sleep too much? Or...
You're actually remembering some verses from Bhagavad Gita. Krishna counsels moderation. And so it's from the Gita. Although Patanjali, I don't recollect anything in Patanjali that directly addresses that, except that in the the niyamas, it certainly is inferred. You can definitely see in the practice of the niyamas, you would necessarily practice moderation. So, but I don't think Patanjali addresses it directly, although I'm sure he would enthusiastically endorse what Sri Krishna said.
I just searched my Kindle book for the word eat, and I don't know where this is, on page 97, whatever, but it says, for him who, let a man be moderate in his eating and his recreation, moderately active, moderate in sleep and in wakefulness.
That's from the Gita, yes.
Oh, that's Patanjali's.
Is it?
I just,
Really?
that I found that in this book. Let me tell you where it is. Okay. It's on page 97 of my Kindle, which doesn't tell. Oh, never mind. You know what it is?
What it is?
Swami Prabhavananda's commentary on whatever shloka. Let's see. In the first shloka in chapter 2, and he says, like the Buddha, Sri Krishna counsels moderation.
Yes.
In quotes, yoga is not for the man who overeats, blah, blah, blah. So, so it's in this book, but it's not in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It's not in the sutras. It's just in this book.
So you remembered correctly, Stephen. You just remembered a quote that the Swami had pulled from the Gita. Thank you, Cindy. As usual, the consummate researcher. Anything else from anyone before we read on?
So I was kind of thinking about the word non-covetousness, which almost takes you to the sense that you do not accept or do not desire for things that are not yours. You should desire to do things, but not desire for things that are not yours. And I think somewhere Vivekananda even pointed out not to even accept large gifts, where if you do, your mind seems to be laden with the misgivings of the person that you're receiving gifts from. So that also is probably related to this sutra.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, precisely. Covetousness and greed are kissing cousins, as my granddaddy would have said. And, very well observed, Bhaskar, very well observed. Anything else from anyone before we go on? Well, I think this has been a very productive discussion of Shloka 39, Chapter 2. I think there's been a real expanded understanding among ourselves, including myself, of what is meant here. So thank you all. If there's nothing else, then Jeff can read on.
I just make one little comment, and just a reminder for all of us that we're studying Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is Raja Yoga, which is one of 4 yogas we study here. It's all studying the same thing, but this is a way to do this thing that
Yes.
it's not the way.
Exactly.
So take what you like and what works, and, as my friend JC used to say, let the wind blow the rest away. But I mean, it shouldn't ever make us feel like we're doing something wrong if it's contrary, what we're reading is contrary to our own practice, because I don't think anybody here practices all this stuff right down the line, or needs to, or wants to.
No, and a bhakta, and Janaki spoke as a bhakta. A bhakta's approach to this, from the bhakti yoga point of view, is very different indeed. So, thank you, Cindy, as usual. Thanks for bringing that in.
So one more item I wanted to bring up is the one-line translation talks about the past, present, and future existence. So once you practice this, you gain knowledge. I can understand the past and present, and I'm trying to understand the future. Is it that if the sadhaka or the bhakta realizes what's happened in the past lives, does it mean that the practitioner now knows what to do in future existences? Or does it mean that I can see my past, I can see my present, and I can also see my future? My future is already inscribed, and that's what's going to happen.
It's not inscribed, Bhaskar. It's the divine does not, all of the karmas are associated with your present body, and any future bodies that you may take. The person who attains this state that is described in this shloka of being greedless can then begin to see what the invitations will be for their future, what invitations there will be, and those that they will accept, and those that they will enthusiastically follow, but they will not be compelled to return to human birth. So that if anyone who attains this state of insight, where they can see their past, present, and future with this clarity, will not be compelled to take human birth, so that they will then be able to accept some invitation of the infinite as it represents itself in the what's called the solar path, or the path of the saints. And again, the utter lack of compulsion is one of the features here. So nothing is inscribed. It is simply, you will be able to see your own vector, where your vector is leading among the possibilities, the infinite possibilities of the divine being, beyond time, space, and causation.
Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Just an aside, was that your phone that rang?
Nope.
No, that was mine. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine, because he's got a special ring. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the special ring person calling by accident. Never mind, okay.
Thank you. Nope, 'twas not my phone.
Shall I forge ahead?
Forge.
All right, sir. The next two shlokas are grouped together, and then a couple of paragraphs of commentary follow. Shloka 40. As the result of purity, there arises indifference toward the body and disgust for physical intercourse with others. I'll repeat that. As the result of purity, there arises indifference toward the body and disgust for physical intercourse with others. And 41, moreover, one achieves purification of the heart, cheerfulness of mind, and power of concentration. I'm sorry, let me start that one over. Moreover, one achieves purification of the heart, cheerfulness of mind, the power of concentration, control of the passions, and fitness for vision of the Atman. And repeating number 41, moreover, one achieves purification of the heart, cheerfulness of mind, the power of concentration, control of the passions, and fitness for vision of the Atman. Patanjali now describes the results which are obtained by practicing the various observances or niyamas. The physical body is the grossest and most outward manifestation of our consciousness. As a man's mind becomes purified, he naturally loses his sense of identification with his body. Therefore, he grows indifferent to it, regarding it as a mere external garment which is neither new nor clean. Furthermore, he ceases to desire the bodies of others, since he no longer identifies those bodies with the consciousness that inhabits them. If we really knew and loved the Atman within others, the sexual act would seem utterly meaningless to us. When the Atman is known to be everywhere and is always a unity, why should two outer coverings embrace? Purity of mind shows itself in a man's mood. He becomes increasingly dominated by sattva, the guna of illumination and peaceful happiness. The first sign of your becoming religious, says Vivekananda, is that you are becoming cheerful. Yogi, everything is bliss. Every human face that he sees brings cheerfulness to him. Misery is caused by sin and by no other cause. What business have you with clouded faces? If you have a clouded face, do not go out that day. Shut yourself up in your room. What right have you to carry this disease out into the world? And that concludes Vivekananda's quote and also the commentary.
So would you read all of that again from the beginning of 40 right through all of the commentary?
Okay.
Because this starts now we've finished with the yamas, the restraints, and we've started on the niyamas. The niyamas are the observances that replace, slowly and slowly, replace this self-centered and self-concerned attitude that results in the need for the restraints. So now what, if you're going to restrain yourself from that, what do you replace that with? These are Patanjali's suggestions and their results. So please, with that in mind, we've finished with the yamas with 39. Now we're moving on to the yamas, to the niyamas, which translates as observances.
So, Sloka 40, as the result of purity, there arises indifference toward the body and disgust for physical intercourse with others. 41, moreover, one achieves purification of the heart, cheerfulness of mind, the power of concentration, control of the passions, and fitness for vision of the Atman. And the commentary. Patanjali now describes the results which are obtained by practicing the various observances, or niyamas. The physical body is the grossest and most outward manifestation of our consciousness. As a man's mind becomes purified, he naturally loses his sense of identification with his body. Therefore, he grows indifferent to it, regarding it as a mere external garment which is neither new nor clean. Furthermore, he ceases to desire the bodies of others, since he no longer identifies those bodies with the consciousness that inhabits them. If we really knew and loved the Atman within others, the sexual act would seem utterly meaningless to us. When the Atman is known to be everywhere and always a unity, why should two outer coverings embrace? Purity of mind shows itself in a man's mood. He becomes increasingly dominated by sattva, the guna of illumination and peaceful happiness. The first sign of your becoming religious, says Vivekananda, is that you become cheerful. To the yogi, everything is bliss. Every human face that he sees brings cheerfulness to him. Misery is caused by sin and by no other cause. What business have you with a clouded face? What business have you with clouded faces? If you have a clouded face, do not go out that day. Shut yourself up in your room. What right have you to carry this disease out into the world?
So, any comments from your own wisdom or experience about this beginning of the discussion of the niyamas?
So I would like to say, I react negatively to misery is caused by sin and no other cause. I think about the people of Ukraine, and I don't understand that point of view.
I agree with you, Janaki, and as someone who is now seemingly recovered from depression, I can tell you that I don't think my misery was caused by sin. Maybe that's a karma question that I don't understand, but I didn't think it was. It was the result, I think, of a imbalance in brain chemistry, and it was something that I had to deal with. But I don't think it's anything that I brought on myself through sin or anything else.
Agree. Third person agreeing with that here. I had a lot of took issue with this the first time I read it, and I have read this book quite a few times, and tried to understand what he was saying while disagreeing with what it seems like he's saying. Depression and misery, and sometimes truly we bring it on ourselves, but things like depression, anxiety and whatnot, clinical stuff, neurodivergence, that sort of stuff is not brought on by and society has long seen it that way. It's getting better, mental health advocacy and all that, but I think at least what Vivekananda is saying about shut yourself up in your room and what right have you got to, he was just writing from his own experience. I know that some of you think he's, God-like. I don't. I think he's an amazing human being who had a lot to share, but he could get moody. I mean, Vivekananda, and that might have been the best thing for him to do rather than go out and lash out at somebody, because he'd go out of his room, stay in your room. But if you're just depressed, staying in your room is like the worst thing you can do sometimes. I mean, unless you want to, unless that's working for you. I just had to say that.
All right, here's a possible resolution for this misery is caused by sin. What is sin? Sin
To
is
miss the
missing the
mark.
mark. Missing the mark.
That's exactly.
If we were not missing the mark, we would not be embodied. If we had already achieved the goal or hit the mark, we would not be taking embodiment. So as the Buddha says, as his first great truth, life is suffering. There is a possibility of the end of suffering. What is the end of suffering? The end of desire. And so it isn't pointing a finger at anyone and saying,
Right.
you're miserable because you're a sinner.
Right.
This is exactly not what Swami Prabhupada would say. But the fact that we are, each one of us, embodied, indicates that we have not the mark. We are still missing the mark. We have missed the mark, and that's what brought us into this embodiment. So I don't think it has anything to do with neurodivergence or that you're bad and wrong in any sense. Therefore, you suffer. No, as Jeff pointed out, there is a karmic aspect to this. The karma has to do with the body. We take a body based on the karma that brought us to this embodiment. If that embodiment had in its previous incarnation hit the mark, that is to say, achieved the goal of human life, which is to manifest the divinity within it, then it would not have taken a new body, which is what the previous shloka points to, that you won't take a new body when you achieve purity. But we are still achieving purity in these lifetimes. And it isn't that there's anything wrong with us, which is exactly right with us, that we're even thinking these thoughts. So does that make any sense to any of you who commented, Janaki, Jeff, Cindy?
I think that that would be, if I was arguing this case, I'm not a lawyer, but that's how I would have answered the question too. That how do we define sin? But I'd like you to talk about the part where he talks about staying in your room and not inflicting yourself on others. That's kind of hard to reconcile with there's nothing bad or wrong or anything like that.
Well, as Cindy pointed out, Vivekananda could be quite hard-ass. He himself was moody and would become sometimes quite angry with others. He was given to moods. So this is just one of his extreme statements that Swami Prabhupada chose to quote about when we are in our worst frame of mind. It's probably not generous of us to share that with others. Now, if we have some dear friend with whom we can share ourselves and they will not receive our dark mood as something that then afflicts them, how precious that is. But again, as Cindy pointed out, we're studying Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is a particular path, and it is a very narrow, strict path. If you practice it as a Raja Yogi, you will not participate in worldly life. If you're a full-out Raja Yogi, you simply will not participate in worldly life. Now, that means that there are very few full-out Raja Yogis, just like there are very few full-out Jnana Yogis, because most people do not wish to live in the way that you have to live if you're going to truly practice Raja Yoga or Jnana Yoga. That doesn't mean there isn't something for us to take from each of these paths. There is. But the Swami is commenting on what Patanjali is saying as instruction to a full-out Raja Yogi. As you remember some time back, Patanjali said that. I'm talking to the person who, this is meant for the person who's going to practice it with intensity and full out. So Patanjali was a scientist, not a spiritual counselor. He wasn't a guru. He didn't speak or think as a guru. As Vivekananda points out in his commentary on the sutras, his book Raja Yoga, in his preface, he points out that Patanjali is a scientist. And so what he says is in that spirit.
Brother.
Yes, Stephen.
One of the things too, and I was just reading something this past week about it, is, in the Catholic Church anyway, to say sin, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean a person's culpable. So there's this idea that, I believe I'm correct in saying, like in the Catholic Church and probably most Christian churches will say, yeah, 10-year-old can sin, how culpable they are. Well, we don't know, or someone with we only have we're acting, and I know Eckhart Tolle likes to say we're all acting just at our level of consciousness. So the idea of how responsible you are for what we might think of as sins is very different from, well, yeah, there may be a sin, you've done something, you've harmed yourself, you've harmed others, but are you culpable for it? That's a whole different, or what degree of culpability there is. So I don't know if that's kind of maybe has some relation here or not. Another thing I thought too about this whole idea too, trying to think in terms of Christianity is, I mean, we're in Christianity, we say, we're all in this fallen state. We're outside of paradise. And, so this condition outside of paradise is less than perfect.
Well, it's very difficult to compare the Christian tradition, particularly as practiced by the churches. It's very difficult to compare that with and compare and contrast it with Patanjali, because Patanjali comes from a very different frame of reference called Sankhya. And the Sankhya philosophy does not even admit of a personal God, let alone an incarnation. Although Patanjali himself says, well, it's probably good that you do ally yourself with the personal God or Ishvara. Earlier on in chapter 1, he talks about that. But the comparisons and contrasts they just don't add up. So I appreciate your comments, Stephen, but the church, particularly the Catholic idea of sin, and the more rigid Protestant churches like the Baptists and so on, they're capable of rigidity anyway. Their ideas simply would be incomprehensible to Patanjali. That's not what he means by sin. He means missing the mark, and he means the idea that you have not achieved the goal of human life, not any particular acts. The acts were dealt with in the yamas, what is it that you must refrain from? And all of those things, would be defined and are defined in the Gospels as sins. Stealing, lying, covetousness, self-centeredness in general is spoken against by Christ. But the comparisons and contrasts are very difficult.
Is the word sin used in the Gita at all?
Yes, but again, it is used in a different frame of reference. It's used, the Gita is also written and spoken from the Sankhya perspective. Krishna was speaking from the Sankhya perspective, which is why there is that Appendix B to Swami Prabhuvananda's translation of and commentary on the Gita, that is the cosmology of the Gita. But what Krishna means by sin, again, is very different from what the priest that you would go to confession and talk about your sins.
Hey, Brother Shankara, it's Vicky. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, dear? So glad
I'm
to hear
okay,
from you.
thanks. I just wanted to say a couple of things. When this discussion first began, I agreed. I mean, I was thinking along the same lines that you said, that sin is another way of talking about karma.
Mhm.
And also, I agree that if someone has a very agitated mind, that they should stay in their room and not dump it on other people. And also, as far as whether Vivekananda, was enlightened or what realizations he had or whatever, or any other teacher for that matter, as far as I know, I think until we have reached that level ourselves, we can't judge the level of a teacher. And as far as him being moody, I mean, I know that different teachers use different tactics in their teachings. And sometimes, moods or anger or whatever are not what they appear to be to us. And it can actually be some sort of teaching tool. And as was brought up in the gospel class the other day, something came up about Sri Ramakrishna maybe using certain language which wasn't appropriate. I mean, so are we going to say that because he did that, he wasn't an avatar? You see what I'm saying, or where I'm going?
Oh, absolutely. Hey, and what you're saying, Vicky, is absolutely true. We can't judge. The moodiness that I was commenting on about Vivekananda is reflected in his own self-observation in his letters. We don't find it in his talks, but if you read his letters, he talks about his moods, and they're not. He's not teaching anyone. He's just speaking to his brother disciples, and he's talking about how anxious he became and how depressed he became, and in certain circumstances, and he was just asking for their solace and their understanding. Of course, teachers use a semblance of anger and a semblance of other frames of other ways of being as teaching tools. Clearly, that's the case. So thank you for all of that. But the moodiness that Vivekananda manifested is a reality as in his own self-description.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, sir.
Based on this quote from Vivekananda, it doesn't sound like he was using his mood as a teaching tool, because his advice is to don't go out and share it with others, to
Right.
show some mercy on other people by not exposing them to that. And I really relate to that comment, because when I was going through depressive episodes, I was working full time, and there were times when I could take sick days and days when I couldn't. And so when I would be at work and I would just feel like, what's the name of the character in the Peanuts comic strip that always had a cloud? Pigpen. Always had a cloud of dirt hanging around him. That's how I felt, and I felt like I was sharing this dirt with others, and their mood was negatively affected by my bad mood. And so that made me feel guilty, and that made me feel worse. And it was not good for anybody for me to be there, but I kind of had to be. So I relate to his advice of not sharing that with other people.
Oh, very good.
It kind of pointed out something to me that I've been noticing lately, that I look at people and I just, you kind of determine who people are by their body. And I noticed lately, I've been seeing people a little deeper than just the body, the expressions, the tones, the intangibles that you perceive rather than seeing in the body. And a lot of people are many times very different from what they appear to be if you're just looking at the body.
Absolutely, on all counts, Robert. That's exactly right. And
what
the more we
really
practice, the more this becomes the case.
What really drove it home to me, I had a very dear friend that passed lately, and I've been able to see this person, not the body, but the inside of who they really were. You know,
That's what's pointed to in this shloka and then the commentaries. Yes.
Yes.
You will be able to see beyond the surface. And this is one of the things that characterizes a guru. A guru will know more about you from being with you for 15 minutes than you could possibly tell them if you spoke for a week.
Yeah, just in this class, looking at people's faces, the faces are like the windows, but inside you see a little different in who they really who people really are.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot of songs and a lot of poetry about the difference between the surface being and the person within. So anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, Haima.
Can I add something to what Robert was saying?
Please do.
I have a nice quote I was just reading this morning from an expert sage. It says the nature of things is judged by the inward disposition of the soul. That is, a man gets his ideas about his neighbors from what he himself is.
Yes.
Sometimes we are all at different places in our ideas and souls and our spiritual practices, and we draw different inferences, different meanings out of a word. And this book has, every word has so many implied meanings. Everybody can, each one of us can draw many different ideas about these. And then Swami here said, if you have a clouded face, do not go out that day. He didn't say shut yourself for your lifetime. He said that day, shut yourself up in your room. What right have you to carry this disease out into the world? When I read that, my mind thought about it. If I wake up with a negative or narcissistic attitude, really, what right I have to go out and spread around my neighborhood or my friends or my exercise class peers? Really, just that day, just shut yourself out, maybe go into silence or think. That's probably what Swami is mentioning. This is how I understood. So
very good, Haima, as usual. Very, very instructive, both your frame of reference and your quotes.
thank you,
So,
Bhaskar.
That's why we have this class.
Yes,
I mean, each of us could read this book on our own and come to our own understandings or misunderstandings of what's being said. So we, in this class, we share what we hear and we try to make sense. We're doing the manana together. We're doing the contemplation together. And then each of us will take from it whatever we wish, if anything at all, and apply that to our thinking, which then reflects itself in our speech and our behavior. Optimally, studying this book will, for each of us, result in auspicious changes in thinking, speech, and behavior. Otherwise, why would we want to take the time to do this? This is not an intellectual exercise. This is a spiritual practice. So it is so welcome that you all are here, that you say these things. And as I've said repeatedly, even those of you who do not speak up, you're sharing with us. We feel the thought current, whether we bring it into our awareness or not. There is only one consciousness. And so we are sharing that consciousness. And so your feelings, your thoughts, your reactions are all part of that mix. And it is powerful and it is auspicious. And it's one of the reasons that there are quite a number of us here this afternoon. How wonderful this is. So I'm going to ask if there's any final thought or concern from anyone. Any thought, question, or concern? If there is, please share it. Otherwise, we'll wind it up for this week.
Actually, I do. I'll make it quick.
Yes, well, you don't have to make it quick,
41.
Bhaskar.
Okay. Sutra number 41 actually talks about 5 attributes. The detailed commentary, the 3rd paragraph, covers 2 of them. The first 2 sentences cover the purification of the heart, which is sattva guna. And the second one really is talking about the cheerfulness of mind. And I actually personally feel, forget the moodiness of Vivekananda, he may or may not have been, but what he has written here, and if you really want to follow Patanjali, it's probably one of the minimum things that you need to do to be able to achieve the attribute of cheerfulness of mind. And I think the word in Sanskrit is somnasya, which means good mind, cheerfulness, mind, and a few other things. So that's where I'll stop.
Okay, well, thank you, Bhaskar, for all of that. As always, very well observed. Anything else from anyone? All right. Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Abir Moiti. What a powerful prayer. O dearly beloved, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from this realm of endless noise and relentless deception to thine abode of clarity, serenity, and peace. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we be always and know we are always in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Hari Om Tat Sat. Oh, dearly beloved, make it so. Any final thought or question from anyone? All right, tomorrow morning there'll be a talk. We're starting to study Karma Yoga. This will be a month. The March is a month for the study of Karma Yoga. And the title of the talk is Whose Karma Is It? And you'll see that there will be very great relationship to some of the things that we read and discussed this morning. Whose karma is it? Any final thought or question or concern from anyone? All right, dears. Until tomorrow morning, for those of you who choose to join us, look forward to seeing whoever comes at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Jai, 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 Shri Ramakrishna, Jai Ma.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.